In the journey of life, you are in control of your own destiny. Where you go and how far, you decide. Good day, everyone. Today we have the pleasure of having with us Mr. James Jones, a conservative voice who is running for Lieutenant Governor of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He has an MBA, is a successful businessman who believes in limitations of government power. He is also a decorated naval veteran who's fought honorably in 3 wars. He is a fighter who provided martial arts training to U.S. Navy SEALs in unarmed self-defense and survival skills. Is he the right man for today's fight? Let's take a look and you decide. Welcome, Mr. Jones. Welcome to our show. How are you?
I am doing just fine, and thank you so much for the invitation to be with you this morning, Anastasia, and on this beautiful program of yours.
Thank you so much. So let's ask the important questions here. What inspired you to run for the position of Lieutenant Governor of our great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania? Because we're in dire need today.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, first of all, I am a Frederick Douglass conservative, and I believe in voting your values. I believe that Frederick Douglass supported 3 boxes, and I support those boxes. He talks about the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. And occasionally you have to go to you got to go to a box that's a soap box that everyone periodically will step onto. And I guess that's where I decided that I would go to get involved with politics in Pennsylvania. I'm an Eagle Scout. I fought in 3 wars. I run 2 businesses and helped our economy in more ways than one. Well, so what inspired me to run for Lieutenant Governor was that I received a phone call from my pastor, Jerry Paradise at Calvary Chapel of Pennsylvania. And Jerry had received a call, an inquiry from a person who said, hey, who at your big church of about 13,000 people that we might be able to run as a candidate for official office? And he said, well, there's only one person out of this 13,000 that we know of, and that is James Jones. So Jerry Paradise, the guy who was a pastor, contacted with this gentleman named Patrick Cubbage. And Patrick asked me, he says, if you had a choice, what would you run for in Pennsylvania? I said, U.S. Senate. And he said, well, that's already filled and plugged by somebody that we're standing behind. And I said, well, then nothing else. He says, would you consider Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania? And I said, I hadn't thought about it, but I tell you what, let me get with my pastor and I'll pray about it and I'll get back with you. So my inspiration to get into this race for Lieutenant Governor was driven not by any type of selfish need, but because it was inspired by the Holy Spirit. I'm a Christian, and I believe that God directs my path and all the things that I've done, even since I was 12 years old. So that's how I end up in this race right now, an exploratory event, which I ran for Congress in the 8th Congressional District in 2010. And I ran for 2nd Congressional District in 2016. I understand what the landscape is all about, and I understand what it takes to be able to bring a team together and run a successful campaign. So that's what got me involved into this right now.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Let me ask you a question, because certainly today we do need a godly man. So I appreciate you for stepping up. But what would you say makes you a constitutionalist? Because I think today we need the law of the land more than anything to be followed.
You know, having gone to law school and learning what the Constitution works as an instrument that is unchangeable. You know, some people think that it's malleable, but it's unchangeable. And our forefathers were so sharp in their mundane manners of being ministers as they put together this profound document. What makes me a constitutionalist is that perhaps I also believe in applying the law, and that it's a law that no man can just arbitrarily change just to, for their own personal greed or their own personal need. It has to be applied evenly across the board. And I believe the citizens of this Commonwealth want a government to operate in such a consistent manner. They don't want someone just, creating unconstitutional acts, for example, exceeding your capacity to move around. Even in the midst of this pandemic, we've had that to happen already. We need to have a group of legislators who are unafraid to tackle hard issues that may not be so popular, but by the same token, it is within the confines of the Constitution. And that's what makes me feel very strongly and committed to being a constitutionalist.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, actually, Mr. Jones, because May 18th, there's a few things going on. It's a very special date, and the people need to know. Not only is it a primary date for election, but there are also 4 ballot questions on the voting block. The first 2 are constitutional amendments. Being an attorney, you realize what they mean, but not everybody does. And they deal with emergency declarations and the government's role. Tell us what they mean and tell the people why they need to get out that vote.
Well, first of all, I'm not an attorney. I just went to law school.
Okay. Fair enough.
Well, I want to be able to make sure that people understand that those 4 ballot questions that you mentioned are questions that are very uniquely phrased. And I think each and every member, when they look at those 4 ballot questions, to look at them very carefully. So ballot question number 1, it talks about the Pennsylvania Constitution being amended to change existing laws and increase the power of the General Assembly to unilaterally terminate or extend a disaster emergency declaration. Quite frankly, what that means, Anastasia, is that in context, they want to propose an amendment that comes in response to the governor's veto of House Resolution 836 of 2020, which would have put an end to the COVID-19 disaster declaration and the governor's unilaterally authority to handle it. So he made an unconstitutional decision alone, and we need to make sure that that doesn't happen again. No governor has that type of power. The second ballot question is in reference to the Constitution being changed for disaster declaration expiring after 21 days. It's a detailed question, but under the Constitution Amendment, disaster declarations would be limited to no more than 21 days and allowing time for the General Assembly to be called together and to discuss what the emergency needs are and to see what funds and resources need to be made available. But it never should be just left up to one sole power as a governor to make those unilateral decisions. But it's currently under law, and the governor can declare a national emergency for a period of up to 90 days, and he can renew it as often as he or she likes. We need to be able to have a better control over that.
Well, you're definitely right about that, Mr. Jones, and I'm glad that you brought real clarity to that question, because we've been living 14 months of unilateral dysfunction here, especially for small businesses and middle class and hardworking people like our folks, our neighbors, our family members, our congregations, and so forth. So it's important that people get out there and vote. And what you said is so important, because if we get the majority vote, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Jones, if we get the majority vote, what that means is that the emergency declaration ends that day, and that we, as our legislative branch, can start preparing for the future without an emergency declaration over our head unnecessarily. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, Anastasia. We have lost 31% of businesses in the state of Pennsylvania, in the Commonwealth. Not 31 that just filed for bankruptcy. They're shut down for good. And we had one person who put us on lockdown for those 14 months that you mentioned. And right now we have people that are unemployed. We have people who are looking for government assistance, which may or may not be there. And we have to be able to put people back to work again, and to do it respectfully. We've seen that done in other places, Florida, Texas. We've seen successful governments ran in such a manner, and they don't have a high population of coronavirus infections. They are people who understand, they use a common sense approach. And that's what we have to have, a common sense approach, and the amendments that go forward, and with people who understand business needs. Businesses must operate. And it's a socialization process to be able to work, to be able to enjoy the benefit of having customers, to be able to say, I have a job, to be able to earn income. I don't think the American people, certainly not the people of Pennsylvania, want to have handouts offered $600, $1,400 every so often. That's not going to do anything. Put us back to work. Let people get back to work and use a common sense approach that allows for people who run businesses to do what they do. Unfortunately, we have a government that says we want small businesses to be taxed even more during the course of coming out of this pandemic. That is ridiculous. They barely have money to survive because they were operating, those which were in business, at 25% of capacity. 25% of business operation. So this government said, I'm going to determine who survives and who doesn't survive. They put no limitations on Walmart, no limitations on Home Depot, Lowe's, but there were limitations on the religious communities. Religious communities are suffering. And people like myself, you need to be spirit fed. You have to be able to deal with the issues of life. And we need to have not only a good message, but we need to have the ability to congregate and to see one another. And for 14 months being locked down, that is just simply unconstitutional.
Well, I want to say to you, Mr. Jones, it seems that businessmen in political leadership roles have really worked out for our great country of America. And you being a businessman, and I just want to say it up there in case our audience did notice, most people, I think, on the left, their heads are going to blow up when they see you, because you are a conservative gentleman with a voice, and you don't necessarily look like how they want you to look like. And you're certainly an example of really who we are as a people, because all we want is our freedoms, and it doesn't matter what we look like. It doesn't matter what church we attend. We just want to love our communities and to have our freedoms for our families. So I'll ask you this question, because this is something that's been looming recently, especially with the COVID-19 epidemic and the questions of vaccinating or not, which I feel is a very personal decision for everyone to make with themselves, their doctor, and their God. So the question I ask to you is, people are living in a time where they have to worry about freedoms, and particularly about the possibilities of a vaccine passport. Where do you stand on medical freedoms?
Well, it's amazing. There are two chains of thought about the medical freedoms. But the worst part is the term passport vaccinations, because there's a great deal of abuse that can go along with that passport vaccination term alone. Now, historically in America, we've also had to have vaccinations for children to go to school. And that's been mandated, for measles, mumps, chickenpox. Those are vaccinations that simply were necessary to help address issues like polio, to help keep a family healthy. But right now we're looking at a time where the government is saying you must take this vaccination, or your limitations of power to travel will be limited, or your limitations to access buildings will be limited, and you must carry around this card, or otherwise you'll be denied certain benefits and privileges. And so often people come to me and say, hey, that sounds pretty much like a one world order of government if we revert to that type of vaccine passport, if that's what the government is going to term it. We need to be careful with how much power we release to the government. We need to have safeguards in place that will allow us to do what we feel medically able to do under our Constitution. If we deviate and move too far from it, that's one thing that's about infringement. We want to make sure that our constitutional rights are well protected. And infringement is something that the courts have always held true to. There's some court cases that I do know of where Justice John Marshall Harlan, he said that, who established in the first place the court's pantheon on defending the shameful case of Plessy v. Ferguson, which was a race segregation case, but they talked about it in terms of the government's overreach, okay? And even though we have to be careful on how rulings are taking place, we have to have a government, we have to have a Supreme Court, we have to have an organization that works effectively and not with the strong overreach of government. And
yes, I couldn't agree more with you, Mr. Jones, because, even the term vaccine passport, it sounds like, well, you know what? I don't really travel on a plane, so what do I really care so much about a vaccine passport? But people, I think citizens need to realize that what that means is you might be locked down in your house permanently. You might not be able to get a job or go to work if, in fact, you have a mandate umbrella that is so severe like that. And, we've lived through our history at different times like this, where people had these overreached mandates and lived under them. And we saw what that brought to us. And that's why also, people need to do their research and see what the pros and cons are. But in the end, our country was built on the freedoms that God provided to make these choices for our bodies and for our families. So, I have a big problem with that personally, Mr. Jones, and I'm glad that you bring that perspective, because my children are my children, and I know what keeps them healthy, and my doctor knows what keeps them healthy. And I certainly don't want some bureaucrat coming in and telling me what to do with my children or my mother or my father. And that's a private, personal thing. So I'm glad that you put in that perspective. Let me ask you one more question, because you have such a rich history. And thank you so much for serving our country as a veteran. I mean, it's so impressive. When I researched you, I said, this man, you've done so much. Tell me a little bit more about, tell our audience a little bit more about your military background. How's that led you to be the leader in your community today?
Well, thank you very much for that particular question, Anastasia. I grew up as a sharecropper, one of the poorest of the poor in rural Arkansas. So my family lived on a farm, and we worked very hard, sun up to sundown. And we still had school to go through, and my family were Christians, and the thing that we embedded upon us is hard work, and you don't take handouts from anybody, but we also had an opportunity to grow spiritually and to grow in our community. We did for others in the community when they couldn't do for themselves. So what inspired me to join the service was my brother was in the Navy during the Vietnam War, and he and I were very, very close. He was like a mentor to me. So I volunteered under the U.S. Navy's Brother Duty program just to be with my brother. And what happened was that I got to spend time with him, and we went to Vietnam together, and I got to bring the last boat people out of Vietnam. So while on active duty, I went to school, got an education, got out of school, went to law school, got an MBA, and then I ran for Congress before. And I said, all of these things are really coming together because I need to have that public service background. I need to have that community background. I need to have that Eagle Scout background to be able to deliver what is inside of me. I'm a Christian man. I'm a father of 3 children. I have 8 grandchildren, lovely grandchildren. And it's amazing when I hear from my grandson who is in college and he says, Grandpa Jones, I'm so proud of you that you're going to run for Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania. I can't wait to come out when you're going through inauguration and spend time with you again. He loves Austin Jones is his name. He loves to spend time with me anyway, and he comes in from Georgia. But these are reasons why I think we need to prepare for a better life for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. And I believe that I have that expertise to bring it there, whether it's in some of the areas of responsibility that this lieutenant governor would be responsible for, would be, for example, the Military Bases Community Enhancement Commission, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Council, the Prison and Pardons, Commission, and being governor oversight for the Turnpike, as well as having the final vote as the chairman of the Senate. I think those are things that have helped me. My background has helped me to be better prepared and equipped to walk right into that position on the first day, hit the ground running, and start the job off the way it should be done.
Well, family certainly means so much to you, and today it means more so than ever because, we're being tested in so many ways. I will tell you something, Mr. Jones. Austin and the rest of your family are certainly lucky to have their Grandpa Jones. They're fighting the good fight and stepping it up because we need more people in the grassroots cause to step up today people we can trust, who will take the fight to the people who need it. Thank you so much for spending this morning, this time with us, Mr. Jones. And let me let you know that we will certainly be following your progress. And it was a sincere pleasure actually meeting you in Monroe County at the Republican meeting the other day. And you just sparked such a nice conversation with me. I said, this gentleman, I need to find out more about him, because honestly, I felt very, very bad that I hadn't known about you. And I researched you, and I implore the audience, please find out about your candidates, okay? So that you know who you're gonna fall behind and support and push through. So I leave my audience with this question. Ask yourselves, what are the issues that affect you the most? Are your representatives or the upcoming candidates for office representing them? Because in the end, you are in the voting booth ultimately, and you have to make a choice. You decide. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. And if I can add one final comment, people can reach me on my website, www.jones, JONESFORLTGOVERNORPA.com. I'd love to be able to have your input. I have issues mentioned. I have places for you to volunteer, to be a part of my team, as well as make donations as you so free to do so. Thank you.
And we will put Mr. Jones' information on our site, so please feel free to contact him. He needs as much support by the good people as possible. Thank you again, Mr. Jones.
Thank you so much, Anastasia, and have a great day.
You too. And please don't forget to go to freedompatriotsunited.com to become a Freedom Patriot and receive communications to help you stay informed of current political events and bills that may affect you in dramatic ways. Pre-registration has begun, and sales on all our Freedom Patriot gear is now available. Please go to freedompatriotsunited.com. Thank you.